Walking through the forest on a hike used to be one of my favorite experiences in the world, until one day I ended up getting lost. It happened while I was on a walk along a trail that I had hiked dozens of times, only this time I decided to go down one of the pathways that I had never taken before. However, after walking for a couple of hours, I slowly realized that what I was walking on wasn't a hiking trail, but instead an old game trail. And just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, the clouds began to roll in. I tried to follow the trail back, but the sunlight quickly faded from the sky as it quickly began to downpour. The rain was coming down in torrents as I made my way through the dense woods. As time dragged on, the day turned to night, and I was nowhere near finding my way back yet. The dark, stormy night made it difficult to see more than a few feet ahead of me, and I spent hours trying to find my way back to the trailhead, but it seemed like every turn I took was the wrong one and just led me deeper into the heart of the forest. As the rain soaked through my clothes, a sense of unease began to settle over me. There was no denying it anymore. I was lost. Panic started to rise within me, but I knew that I had to stay calm. I couldn't afford to make any rash decisions. I needed to think clearly if I wanted to make it out of the woods alive. I tried to reorient myself, but there was no way that I could find any sense of direction through the storm that night. I cursed under my breath, feeling a sinking feeling in my stomach. I had relied too heavily on technology and hadn't brought a compass or a backup map. I decided to keep walking, hoping that I would stumble upon a familiar landmark or a sign that would point me in the right direction. The more I walked, the more disoriented I became. The rain seemed to distort my perception of distance and time, and every step I took felt like a step deeper into the unknown. As the night wore on, I realized that I had no choice but to seek shelter until the rain subsided. I spotted a large tree with a hollowed-out trunk and decided to take refuge there. It was far from ideal, but it offered some protection from the rain. Inside the hollowed trunk, I huddled against the damp wood, shivering from both the cold and fear. The sound of raindrops hitting the leaves above me was deafening, drowning out any other noise. As I tried to rest a bit and wait for daylight, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, that there was something lurking in the darkness just beyond my sight. I tried to close my eyes and rest, but sleep eluded me. Every rustle of the leaves or snap of a branch set my heart racing. The woods seemed alive with unseen creatures, their presence both haunting and menacing. And eventually, I couldn't take the anxiety anymore, and something in my body told me that I needed to keep moving. So I slowly got up and once again began hopelessly wandering the dark and dreary forest. As the night dragged on, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being followed. Every time I glanced over my shoulder, I thought I caught glimpses of shadowy figures darting between the trees. I couldn't be sure if it was my imagination playing tricks on me or if there was something truly out there. Doubt and fear began to consume me. I questioned my every decision, berating myself for getting lost in the first place. The woods had transformed from a place of beauty and tranquility into a nightmare, a prison from which I just couldn't escape. Hours passed in agonizing silence. The rain finally began to taper off, and a glimmer of hope sparked within me. I walked for what felt like an eternity, my legs heavy and my mind weary. Just as I was about to lose all hope, a flicker of light caught my eye. It was a distant glow, barely visible through the trees. With renewed determination, I stumbled toward it, pushing through thick foliage and slippery mud. As I emerged from the woods, I found myself standing at the edge of a road. Relief washed over me like a tidal wave. A passing car stopped, and I climbed in, grateful for the warmth and safety it provided. Looking back at the woods disappearing into the distance, I couldn't help but feel a sense of profound gratitude. I had survived the night. The ordeal had pushed me to my limits, and yet I survived. I'll never forget my first night alone in my new house. It was a small one-bedroom home that was about 20 minutes away from my job on the outskirts of the city. After spending the day packing, I couldn't wait to go to sleep, but the storm that night seemed to keep me awake. The pitter-patter of rain against the window pane filled the room as I lay in bed, struggling to find sleep on that stormy night. The dim glow of the streetlights outside was casting eerie shadows that almost danced across the walls. The atmosphere was heavy and unsettling, but I tried to convince myself it was just my imagination running wild. As I drifted in and out of consciousness, a sudden chill swept over me, causing me to jolt awake. I could feel it. It was like there was a presence in the room. My heart raced, and I slowly turned my head from one side of the room to the other. That was when I saw it. As soon as I glanced at the window, there it was, illuminated by the faint glow of the streetlight. I saw a pair of eyes staring directly at me. Fear coursed through my veins as I realized I was being watched. Panic set in, and I pulled the covers up to my chin, shielding myself from the intruder's gaze. I wanted to scream, to call for help, but my voice seemed to be trapped within me, stifled by a combination of terror and disbelief. What was really terrifying was the fact that I noticed the person looking through my window. It was as if they were unfazed. The eyes outside the window remained fixed on me, unblinking and filled with an unsettling intensity. Who was this person? What did they want from me? My mind raced with countless questions, each one more terrifying than the last. Summoning all my courage, I slowly rose from the bed, careful not to make any sudden movements. The rain continued to drum against the glass, creating a disorienting soundtrack to this nightmare. I approached the window with trepidation, my heart pounding in my chest. As I drew nearer, the figure's features became clearer. It was a man. His face was being obscured by the shadows. I could feel his piercing gaze as if he could see into the depths of my soul, and the realization sent shivers down my spine. With trembling hands, I fumbled for my phone and dialed 911, desperate for help. But as I held the phone to my ear, all I heard was a dead silence, a complete absence of sound. It was as if the outside world had ceased to exist, leaving only me and the intruder locked in this macabre dance of terror. Time seemed to stretch endlessly as I stood there, paralyzed by fear. The seconds that passed felt as if they dragged for hours, and the entire time the figure outside remained a motionless silhouette against the backdrop of rain-soaked streets. After a moment of locking eyes with the stranger, I managed to muster up the courage to reach for the curtains and draw them closed, hoping that he would just disappear. But as I reached forward, I paused as I noticed his eyes following my arm. I drew a deep breath into my lungs as I quickly finished closing the curtains, and then I took a step back from the window. It was as if a wave of relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. The realization that the intruder was still there, only now I couldn't see them, almost made the situation worse. And as I stood there wondering if I should open the blinds or not, I decided against my better judgment that I should at least check to see what they were doing. I slowly leaned forward and peered out through the crack in the center of the curtains, and I was surprised to see that the strange man was no longer there. I stepped back again and began thinking to myself, where had he gone? Would he return? That was when I heard it. A chill coursed through my body, and I turned to face my bedroom door as I heard the unmistakable sound of someone trying to turn the doorknob at the front door. I slowly moved out of my bedroom and into the hallway where I could clearly see the entrance to the house, and as I got closer to the door, I was certain that the noise I was hearing was the handle. I quickly closed the distance between myself and the door and turned the deadbolt lock to make sure that the door was secure, and when I did, the person on the other side must have heard it. They were no longer trying to turn the door handle anymore. Instead, the sound of banging coming from the other side made it seem like they were trying to kick the door in. I yelled out for them to stop, and when they didn't, I decided to lie and said that I called the police. At that moment, The banging on my front door stopped, and the only sound I could hear outside was the sound of raindrops. I waited by the front door for a few minutes and listened before walking around and ensuring that all the entrances into my home were sealed up. I spent the remainder of the night in a state of heightened vigilance, my senses on high alert. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind sent my heart racing. Sleep was an impossible feat, as the image of those haunting eyes continued to haunt my thoughts. Morning finally broke, bringing with it a sliver of reassurance. The sun's rays chased away the darkness, filling the room with warmth and light. But despite the daylight, a lingering sense of unease remained. I immediately contacted the authorities, recounting the terrifying events of the previous night. They arrived promptly, offering their reassurances and promising to investigate. But deep down, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched, that the intruder's presence lingered even in his absence. Days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, but the incident remained etched in my memory. I became hyper-vigilant, installing security measures and double-checking every lock and window in my home. Sleep eluded me, plagued by nightmares of those piercing eyes. To this day, I am haunted by the knowledge that any time I look out my window, someone might be there watching me. The rain cascaded down in relentless sheets on that stormy night, obscuring my view of the road ahead as I embarked on a late-night drive through the desolate countryside. The rhythmic swish of the wipers was the only sound accompanying the drumming of raindrops against the windshield. The world outside seemed cloaked in darkness, both figuratively and literally, as if holding a secret I was about to uncover. I gripped the steering wheel tightly, my knuckles turning white with each passing mile. The desolate stretch of road seemed to stretch on indefinitely, lined with towering trees that swayed ominously in the wind. I couldn't help but feel a creeping unease settle over me, as if I was trespassing in a place where I didn't belong. Suddenly, the headlights illuminated a figure standing on the side of the road. I squinted my eyes and saw that it was a hitchhiker. They were soaked from head to toe and holding out a desperate thumb. Against my better judgment, I felt a twinge of compassion and pulled over, rolling down the window. "Need a lift?" I called out over the sound of the rain. The hitchhiker nodded with a look of gratitude etched upon their face as they climbed into the passenger seat. Their presence brought a sense of relief, as if the darkness had temporarily lifted. The air in the car grew heavy with silence, broken only by the drumming of rain against the roof. As we drove, a sense of foreboding settled over me. I stole glances at the hitchhiker, attempting to discern their features through the rain-streaked window, but their face remained hidden, concealed by the shadows. "So, where are you headed?" I asked, trying to break the tension. They turned their heads slowly toward me, their eyes glinting in the dim light. "Anywhere," they replied with an unnerving smile. "I don't really have a plan yet." I thought that was a strange response. Unease gnawed at the pit of my stomach, but I pushed my fears aside. I told myself I was just being paranoid and that they were just a person seeking shelter from the storm. But as we continued down the rain-soaked road, the hitchhiker's demeanor began to change. Their smile twisted into a sinister grin, and their eyes glowed with an otherworldly intensity. Panic tightened its grip on me, and I considered pulling over and demanding they leave the vehicle. But fear held me back, chaining me to this macabre journey. Minutes turned into hours, and the world outside became a blur of darkness and rain. The hitchhiker's presence grew increasingly unsettling, their body language sending waves of unease coursing through me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was trapped, an unwitting passenger in a sinister game that was taking place in my own car. Finally, unable to bear the tension any longer, I made a split-second decision. I abruptly pulled over, my heart pounding in my chest. "I'm really sorry about this, but I'm going to have to ask you to get out of the car, please," I said, my voice quivering with both fear and resolve. I pointed at a building that wasn't too far away and said that he could find shelter there, as I hoped he would just get out. That was when the hitchhiker turned to me, their eyes gleaming with an unholy light. "You know, I was about to ask you the same thing," they hissed, their voice dripping with malevolence. Without waiting for a response, I realized that I had brought danger into my car and was now concerned about what would happen if I didn't listen to them. I threw open the car door and stumbled out into the rain-soaked night. I could feel their gaze burning into my back as I ran, my footsteps splashing through puddles, my heart pounding in my ears. I didn't dare look back, fearing what I might see. Minutes turned into an eternity as I sprinted through the darkness, desperate to put distance between myself and the haunting presence that had infiltrated my car. My breath came in ragged gasps, and my legs threatened to give way beneath me, but I pressed on, fueled by adrenaline and sheer terror. Finally, another passing car saw me running through the rain and pulled over to see if I needed help. I explained to them what had happened to me, and they were kind enough to let me use a cell phone that they had. I made 2 calls, one to the police who came and took my statement, and one to my dad to let him know that my car had been stolen and I needed someone to pick me up. The police told me that they would keep an eye out for my car, but they never followed up on that, which tells me that the hitchhiker I had helped out stole my car that night. And although that sucked, I'm thankful that I was able to escape the incident unscathed and unharmed.